So, we're going to do something a little different tonight. We're going to actually record these sessions, and we're going to try. And then I'm actually going to put them up on the website, but I'm going to host them in Windows Azure Media Services, or that's what I'm going to try to do. So, we'll see if it works. Everybody here already knows me. Justin, you're the only non-bit wizard, and we've met many times. So this presentation is a presentation that I've given for Microsoft at 5 Azure Code Camps. It's normally a little bit more full of demos and stuff. I may or may not do them. I'm going to move this over here. Maybe it will work because I don't feel like sitting down. Nope, not at all. All right, I'm going to have to like do this. So there's me. There's information about me. What this code camp, what it is for developers. Microsoft wants them to use Windows Azure, so it's a kind of a crash course overview into Windows Azure. It normally takes about an hour and a half to do the presentation. I'm going to go a little bit faster, so that we're not here till 10 o'clock. After me, and what it's going to cover. I guess I could show you. So pay no attention to that. This is about Wizards. It's all about us. You're not going to do any of that. We're going to do this one. So you can do the other ones if you want. And then if you want to sign up, okay. So what it does is it kind of covers the full range of Windows Azure and kind of tells you about every piece of it. Then after I do this, Philip is going to kind of take you on a deeper dive down into Windows Azure mobile services, which is a very cool feature. This is going to like this. Because I want to stand, but I don't want to do this. Let's see, how can I show it? I bet you that will work. Let's see if this will work. Not at all. Hey, it did work. I don't know how to go back. So what is the cloud? That was the previous slide. Let's go back. This is what I get for trying to stand. And I feel really bad. And I want to go home. And if I hadn't have had this scheduled, as my wife told me to just reschedule the user group meeting, I tried to explain to her I can't really do that. So what is the cloud? Again, this is a kind of a Microsoft geared thing that it's trying to educate you on the cloud in general. And it's really just a different way of computing. It's this large global scale infrastructure of systems that basically allow you to connect things to each other, whether those are systems or people or information or anything like that. So they kind of identified these 4 cloud computing patterns, and these all work well in a cloud environment in which you're, the first one being like an on and off. This is you need to do something, but then you don't need to do something for a large amount of time, and then maybe you need to do it again. If you had to buy the resources to accommodate that up front, you'd have to have these servers sitting there, and anytime that in activity they're just sitting there not being used. The cloud is a much better use for that because you can, you can scale up things as you need them. We don't. You just shut them down. We don't pay for it. Or like an ISP or an ISV that's not ISP, like a startup ISP that's just growing really fast. They need to just keep throwing resources. Cloud's another good use for that because they can just keep scaling up as they want to. And then an unpredictable bursting, which these two are actually kind of funny. Well, this one I can understand. The predictable bursting, something like hrblock.com or something, they know they're going to be busy around April, so maybe they roll up their servers between January and April. They triple their inventory of servers or their computer of servers, and then after that they go back down to 1. That's a predictable burst. But the unpredictable is a good thing, except for Azure doesn't have auto scaling. So I always thought that was kind of funny that it says unpredictable bursting, but you'd still have to go, oh crap, our site's gone, and you go click it. So, but these are kind of the 4 patterns that Microsoft has identified in regards to things that fit well in the cloud. So there's 3 main types, and if you're not familiar, this is kind of a primer into each one of those. There's infrastructure as a service. These are basically hosting your virtual machines in Windows Azure. There's platform as a service. This is what Windows Azure was traditionally brought out as, and I'll explain each one of them. And then there's what's called software as a service, or SaaS. Things there in that model is you don't really have any hardware, you don't have any software, you just consume it. Something like Salesforce.com, you don't pay for any of that, you don't set up Salesforce.com, you just consume it. Office 365 is another one, you're not maintaining these Exchange servers, anything like that, you're just buying that service. So, and it breaks down all these in quite detail. So in your traditional data center, if it's orange, you're dealing with it and you're maintaining it. Thanks, man. Awesome, bro. Of course, the sound's probably not going that.
Right.
So that's okay.
Overload.
Sweet. Okay. I guess I don't need that one. If it's orange, you're messing with it and you're maintaining it. That's obviously your traditional hosting model. Everything you're maintaining software, networking, storage, patching servers, everything like that. Infrastructure as a service. This could even be on your own data center with your own DMs or something like Rackspace or Amazon or now Windows Azure. They're maintaining the host servers for your virtual machines, but your virtual machines, you're still maintaining. You're still patching them, you're installing the OS, your licensing, all that kind of stuff on top of your applications and your data. There we go. Hit the wrong button. In platform as a service, green, Microsoft is maintaining much more. You're just concerned with your data and your application. Software as a service, you're just paying some money and they're going to handle everything for you. So, I thought there was another slide, but I'm going to just say things because I may have to skip some stuff. More control, less control. More to deal with, less to deal with. So the farther you go that way. This is what Windows Azure was initially. Platform as a service. And it was awesome. And it was like, yes. And no one used it. Because everybody has a shitload of virtual machines. Maybe I shouldn't swear because this is being recorded. Anyway, they have a ton of virtual machines, whether they're on their own data center and their own stuff. So Microsoft went, wow, no one's using Windows Azure. Let's make infrastructure as a service. So this actually just got released a couple months ago. And they're going to try to get more people. But really, you really want to be here. As an ISV or a independent software vendor, someone that's producing an application, this is really probably where you want to be because you don't have to worry about anything as far as the architecture. You're just worrying about your data and your application. If you are consuming things, you don't want to stand up your own, a company may not want to stand up their own Exchange server and deal with all that. They can use software as a service to just consume that kind of resource without having to deal with any of it.
So, Bryan, do you mind if I ask this question?
No questions. Hold till the end. No, what?
Okay. Software as a service.
Yes.
So what do you actually send Microsoft to run? I mean, do you send them?
If you wanted to be someone that had software as a service.
Yeah. What's the scenario there?
Well, these are just kind of cloud-based things, and this is really referring to something like Office 365. Mm-hmm. That's software as a service. Okay. Microsoft is hosting that entirely in Windows Azure on the back end, but you just sign up on a website and you configure your Outlook to hit Office 365. You never stood up Exchange. You never worry about your data. It's all managed by Microsoft in the cloud.
Gotcha.
If you wanted to provide software as a service to somebody, you would probably be on one of these categories. And then someone else would treat it like this because they're going to consume your software as a service.
I got you.
So it's red now. I don't know what that means. So what is Windows Azure? It's really this flexible conglomeration of tools and resources that you can use that are all hosted in Microsoft maintained data centers. It's very open. They have a number of open source things that you can do, and it's very, very solid in the regards of they have 6 data centers in the US, 2 in Europe, 2 in Asia. I think there's 1 being built in South America, probably 2 in South America, and 1 or 2 built in Australia. Then they also have their CDN network, which is where they propagate content, and I think there's 32 of those around the world. So it's hard to set up that kind of stuff if you're not a thing, which is the slide I just jumped ahead to. Yeah, there's even more now than the blue dots because this is Chicago, San Antonio, Seattle, I think, and Virginia, Ireland. Not sure. Don't know. They tend to put them away from things that can have natural disasters. So the green ones are the edge data centers, what they call the edge data centers or the CDN, although they are building a they're building at least one there and one there that I know of. Africa does not get any data centers. So they do have a money-back SLA, assuming that you deploy it in the constraints that they had, meaning you have redundant systems. They actually have a money-back SLA. It has gone down a couple times in the last 3 years. As soon as a cloud server says, I can't believe they went down, then they'll go down themselves. And Microsoft did do that, and we have had our own accounts credited back for like an entire month, even though it was down for like an hour or two. They'll credit back an entire month of stuff. But you have to make sure you're deploying to redundant systems in order to get that. The main thing is you only pay for what you're using. If you stand up a site, you run it for a month, you shut it down, you only pay for that 1 month. A good example of that is Scott Guthrie did this webinar thing in, I think it was Switzerland or something. This is like in the last fall. And they used Windows Azure to host web servers to broadcast that so that people could consume it. I think it was kind of before Windows Azure Media Services. So they used these web servers, they stood them up to broadcast this so people could watch this live feed. And they ran them for like 4 days, and it cost like $40 or something. Like, I don't know how much it was like a ridiculous amount that what they ran, or maybe it's like $400 or something for 4 days that they ran this for around the world, and then they shut them down. And then obviously they're not paying for them now. So it's important to know you only pay for what you use. So they kind of break the development down in these 3 areas: virtual machines, cloud services, and websites. And here's, I'm going to hold off on some of these. Philip, how much time did you need? Could you show them the portal a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the portal.
Okay, Philip's going to show you the portal. Typically, this is where I would walk into the portal and show you around, but Philip's going to show you the portal in his session. So, virtual machines, you can do Windows Server and Linux, and it's essentially, I might jump over there in a second, but for right now, I'm just going to go past it. You spin up these virtual machines, and Microsoft has a number of pre-configured images of like Windows Server 2012. Windows Server 2012 was SQL Server 2012. And I mean, maybe I'll be sure to show them that in your presentation. Or I could do it. It's a long presentation. I'm just trying to make sure I get everything in there. But if I have time, I'll come back and I'll show you. But the main thing is you can move these virtual machines as much as you want. Meaning, this is your data center, and there's Windows Azure. You can host them up there. You can host them here. You can actually connect these with a VPN so that your internal people see these just as if they're on the network. Jeff, do we have resources yet that we're doing that with? Yes, we actually have one. We're migrating some old stuff that we had at the Planet, which was our old hosting server. We now have a server sitting in Windows Azure that I don't have to get on any VPN to connect to because Jeff already has the networking set up, so we can just connect to it, straight to it. But more importantly, you can migrate these VHDs up and VHDs back. They do all deal with the VHD format. What that means is if you create a VMware, you could convert it to VHD and use that same image in Windows Azure. Or more importantly, you could pull it out of Windows Azure, put it in your own thing, and then send it over to somewhere else that maybe you wanted to host it with, which is what that's going to show you. So you can move those around, but they are all based on VHD format. So there's the pretty blue things moving around. Next. You're not locked in. Yay. Okay, so what's happening behind the scenes with your virtual machine is you stand up a disk. Your virtual machine is basically a virtual hard disk. What that is behind the scenes, it's one big blob file in Windows Azure storage. And then one day in the data center that you deploy it to, it makes 3 copies of that same drive. It's instantly, there's 3 copies made. If one of them happens to have a problem like that guy, they'll just spin up another blob or spin up another drive and copy your thing there. So you always have three servers that it's running on. Now, if you enable what's called geo-replication, which I actually had this wrong for quite some time, but now I know better. The geo-replication, what it will do is it will copy these 3 drives, a copy of your file to another data center behind the scenes. Now, I will tell you, this is instantaneous. You copy to one, you copy to the media within the same data center. This is an asynchronous process. Meanwhile, Microsoft will copy your drive over there, and what they're doing therefore is if they have to shut down the West US data center, then they'll just bring your site up over here because it's always being copied. I think that's what they did when Hurricane Sandy was coming in New York. They actually they actually copied everything from the Virginia data center to probably the Chicago one, and they actually shut down the entire data center, and everything ran out of the central U.S. one while it was happening. This is always in the same continent, but it's at least 500 miles away. So it's called like a sister data center. So like the Northern Europe copies to the Western Europe one, and the Asian ones copy to each other. And a lot of times people ask me, are they really concerned about their data, whether or not it has to stay like in the country because it's government data or something. So I always have to make that a point so you know that this is always in the same continent, but they're 500 miles away.
So does that have any impact? Like if you do CDN as well,
you can't control the CDN. CDN goes everywhere.
But is each node of the CDN then geo-replicated itself?
I don't know. I don't think that they have. The CDN works off of the edge servers, and they're not the same as the other data centers. I think Microsoft is actually, that they're using other people's data centers for the CDN. I think. So I don't think that they have this infrastructure behind there. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that question. No one's ever asked me that. No one's ever asked me. See me after class. Windows Azure websites. This is probably one of the newer ones, and Vince isn't in the room, so I'll tell you all about it, and he won't yell at me. 412, don't know you. All right. All right. So Microsoft came out with Platform as a Service, which is basically an abstraction of everything, the hardware and the networking and everything, and you just worry about your data and your application that gets deployed onto a server. Now, if you want to, you do have direct access to that server, and you can RDP to it, but it does not have persistent file storage, meaning anything you write to the file system is, what you do is you create a package, you upload it into Windows Azure, then you tell Windows Azure how many servers you want and what the servers look like, what their configuration is. Microsoft pulls that package, stands up a server, and puts your package on it, there's your site. You say you wanted 5 servers, pulls your package, puts it on all 5. If you make a change on one of these servers, it's not persistent because at any point in time, Microsoft may shut down one of your servers, stand up a new one, go back to your package and stand it up. So you don't have a persistent file storage inside of there, which is why we leverage the Windows Azure storage account, which I'll talk about in a minute. The Windows Azure websites works a little differently. You do have persistent file system in the Windows Azure websites, but you have a lot less control over the environment. I think we talk about it a little bit more. If not, I will show you some more about this. Okay, it does do it. So in the shared instance, what happens is it's kind of like your own, it's really, the Windows Azure websites was kind of created because people couldn't afford to stand up a new cloud service for everything that they were doing. So Microsoft came up with a cheaper way for them to stack a whole bunch of applications in kind of one environment. That's what the shared resources are. So what it is, it's kind of like you have your own app pool and your own IIS, and they will deploy you into this range of servers that are spread across however many that they have, and you get a certain number of instances. It's the shared, it's instead of 1, it's about to be 2 green faces, because it's going to be 2. And so it stands up another one in this big pool of things. But what's happening behind the scenes is these are copying to each other. So any file system change made here is copied to that one. So they do keep each other in sync. But the biggest point about it is a lot of the times these applications don't have the integration that they do with the rest of Windows Azure unless you physically write it into there to use the CDN and to use the service bus and the Fabric Cache and things like that. This is more like GoDaddy hosting. You have an FTP, you can FTP to it, you can use Git, you can use TFS Online, you can publish directly from Visual Studio, but essentially you're just copying to a folder on a server somewhere. And at any point in time, you could update a file on that server and it's immediately replicated to the other ones. Behind the scenes. And you can also go to what's called a reserved instance, which basically they build you your own little land to live in. And inside of there, you can stand up 2 instances and they'll make you 2 copies. But what's neat about this, I haven't done this yet, so I don't know a ton about it, is you can actually stack multiple applications in your reserved instance. I haven't done this yet, so I don't know exactly how that works. But it's like the same thing, but you're not dealing with everybody else's, your own resources. You have dedicated resources, things that you're doing. You do not have access to this server, meaning you can't RDP to that. You can't configure anything inside of IIS. They do give you a couple things that you can configure within the portal, some custom MIME types, some handlers, what what version of PHP, what version of .NET, but you don't have like RDP access to set file permissions or anything like that. So it's very good for like development. If you need to stamp a development site very quickly, you can deploy something right to it, stand it up. If I went to it, I could literally make a site in about 20 seconds if I went over there and did it, which I might in a minute. But it is okay. This is where I'm going to differentiate from maybe other people you talked about it. I think you could totally run a production site in this environment. It is not as integrated as what you can do with cloud services, which is what I'll get to in a minute. But the Gulf Coast.net user group runs just like this. It runs in that. That's how the Gulf, so exactly like that actually, in 2 instances.
Can you leverage the CDN with that kind of configuration?
You'd have to manually, well, yes, if you had the code to do so. I have to be careful. I often think of in terms of what you can do with Kentico.
Yeah.
You cannot use Kentico and like that unless you manually write the code. But if I was just talking in .NET in general, yes, you could if you put in the code to leverage the CDN. You have to put in the code to do it. There's no limitations. You just you can actually deploy anything. Which also you can do. That's what I think the next couple slides are. You can deploy anything. You can deploy PHP, Node.js, a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, anything that you would do with that. Okay, I guess there's no slide. You can deploy there. I'll show you one real quick, just because I haven't been over here yet. So let's see if I can do this. So in the slideshow. So do you guys see my desktop now?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I was going to actually let me do this. My machine. Alright, I'm just going to make a new website. Forms application, web application 3, done. So this is my website. It's very awesome. It's a sweet. That is really awesome.
What is
I
that?
have no idea what that's all about.
The demo gods are not happy.
They are not. I guess you have to build it or you just try to run it. So there's a website running locally. If I come over here, I say websites, new, create. I've made so many SOLTIS demo websites. I can't even keep track of them. If I do that, and in a moment, it will be running. You get a free one. You can stay up a site for free. There's that website. There's not going to be much there. It's going to say your site is up and running, but there's nothing deployed to it. So if I wanted to deploy to that site, I can do that right from here. I get the publishing profile to so I can connect my Visual Studio to it. And now that I have the publishing profile, I'll say publish. Publish.
Where did you just save that publishing profile?
I just put it on my desktop.
Okay, so you're finding it.
Yeah, I just went to my desktop.
I thought it was weird. You could just right click publish right there, just anywhere on the machine.
Oh no, I just happened to go to my desktop. So now it's just deployed it. It's copying all the stuff up, copying the files up, and in a second it'll open the website. So I guess a little longer, 20 seconds. And there it is running a BSoltis demo one that has your website.net. Just to show you another example, this is the Gulf Coast.net site. It is running on here as well. I have that running in 2. It's in the shared. Free is obviously free. You only get one server on a free, and there's some limitations with that what you can do with it. On the shared, I can only go up to like 6. If I go to reserved, then I can go up to like 10. But this is currently running on 2 servers, and I can come into here and see some statistics about it, see what's running and everything. So if you have a website or web application, you can quickly use Windows Azure Websites to deploy it to get it up and running to see how it would look. There is some debate as to whether or not it's very suitable for a production environment. I think if I had a smaller site, a non-enterprise customer, I would think that maybe this is an okay solution. But an enterprise level customer would typically want to leverage as much of the platform as they could. And I think it's a little bit easier to leverage that using platform as a service. But I'm not going to say that there's not a time and place for it. I think it's okay. For a free .NET user group site, works out pretty good. Because it's like $15 a month, or I don't know how much it is. I did math. But that's what this is right here. Cool. And there it goes. Now, one thing to know, and this is actually kind of important, if you don't hit these servers, it's like they shut down IIS. And the first time you hit it, if you haven't hit it in a while, it takes a second for like to get it to come back up. More so than if you had just like a normal server somewhere. I think it's just how they're doing it behind the scenes. I think they just let resources go whenever you do it, and then they bring them back up. When the site gets traffic. So if you see nothing hit this for a while, but I was working in it earlier today because I was updating something, so it had a lot of traffic earlier today. But I haven't hit it here, so that's why it took it a few seconds to come up. But anyhow, that is that. So back over to here. There's Holiday or something. I don't know what that was all about. All right. So where are we at? Cloud services, which I kind of already said this, but I'll say it again. So in the cloud service model, you after doing something?
It's not recording anymore.
It isn't?
Or does it show on the top? 30% here.
Let's check it out. I really hope. Oh, it's probably because I jumped out of it. That's why, and I didn't send it over to the. So it's still recording. It just didn't record my desktop the whole time I was showing you the website, which is good. If you switch out, you're going to have to go into here and say presentation to do this. You got to click here because it stopped presenting when I went out of the presentation. I think.
Go back into it, share it.
Yeah. Go back into it and share it again.
Okay.
All right. So I can't see what this thing's doing now. I don't have any idea what that is going on. It's like right in the middle of it. Alright, let's see what that does. It's red again. Doing anything? Okay, so you upload your package into Windows Azure Storage. You define. Let's go back some. So you create this package on your machine. You upload that package into Windows Azure Storage. Then your definition of however you want it to be set up in this demo is going to be 4. It's going to stand up 4 servers, or 8, apparently. No, there's 4. And then it created 4, and then it put your package on each one of those. You can stack multiple sites in here if you want to, and you have a lot more control because you can actually enable RDP access. So you say you want 4 servers. It creates 4 servers, puts them in the mix so that they in the load balancer so they get traffic, copies your application to all 4 of them. Now they're all blue and they're running. And then the load balancer in front of it will balance traffic going to it from all the different devices. So that's what's happening. If one of the servers has a problem, there's a big purple light and a green light, and then it just moves. Then it just grabs your package out of storage again and brings down right into the mix. This is why you can't have persistent files. You can't have persistent file changes because it always goes back to your package. If you want to change your app, you have to go back to your package and upload a new version of it. So let me just show you a little bit. I'm not going to go through that whole process because it'll take a while. But let me show you a little bit how that looks like. So here, yeah. So it stopped recording. So stop. All right. So back over here, I'm going to open up another project. This one will happen to be a. Actually, I don't know. Nothing else. Any questions so far? Besides Mark? So this was a sample app I was actually working with earlier. But this is my web application. And this is just a normal website. I think it's exactly like the other one, actually. If I set it as a startup and I run it, I think it's just a normal website. It's actually a web app, to be exact. But you would just build your application just like this, and then what you do is you create a cloud service project, and then you define what applications IIS needs to set up on the server when you deploy it. And then also inside of here, you can specify what size you want your server to be, how many instances of it there are, as well as a number of other settings. Do you want to enable RDP access? So if I wanted to package this, I could enable RDP access, and I have to put in a certificate, all that kind of stuff. And when you package it, it's basically taking your application, package it up as a CSPKG file or something, and then there's another file that gets created, which is the configuration file. You upload both of those to Windows Azure. So Windows Azure then reads from there to, and it's not gonna let me do it, because I thought I had something to deploy, but I don't. But it will read from that configuration file what kind of server it's supposed to set up, and then it takes your package, which is this one, and then deploys your application on top of it. So you can see, bless you. 35 minutes. I'm not gonna. I messed up one letter. I just changed it today, so. This is the last character that I hit. This is the wrong one. This is going to take just a minute to load up, so I'm going to come back to there in a moment. Let's see, how can I get out of there with this? Go away. So that's our Azure portal. So let me just jump back over to here real quick, and I will do. That's going to do this again. So now it's not going to like extend the desktop. Now it's just going to share the desktop. Now it's just going to duplicate it. So let me jump ahead. Come on, go. All right. So while I'm waiting for that thing to pull up, I'll kind of explain these a little bit. So these are the different aspects of Windows Azure. These are all the different pieces.
Do you want to record right now? Or
yeah, it's recording.
It is. Okay.
I think so. There is, well, there's actually, it doesn't list I was looking for the cloud services and the mobile and the websites, but this is everything else. Microsoft bought Hadoop, which I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Hadoop. If you're not, Mark is going to present in a couple of months probably on Hadoop and big data in Windows Azure, but it's basically big amounts of data that people aggregate and find a bunch of information about. I don't know. It does have a relational database. It is not SQL Server. It used to be called SQL Azure. Now it's called Windows Azure SQL Database. I still call it SQL Azure because that's a lot easier. It is not exactly SQL Server, but it's very close. In 3 years, I found 2 commands that don't work. One is it was that password one. It was encrypt password. Encrypt password wouldn't work because
Certificate.
some of those
Certificate has to
certificate.
be in the master database.
And then the other one was, I just found this one like a month or so, was Writer. It was the reset the identity key. Check identity is like CHK identity or something. It resets an identity field so that it goes back to 1. That's apparently not supported. So there's a number of commands that aren't supported. It's really documented as to what's supported and what isn't. Windows Azure Storage, this is on the back end. You have 3 types of storage. You have blob storage, table storage, and what's called queue storage. Blob storage is just files, information you want to put up there. That's what's integrated in with the CDN. It's the blob storage. You also have table storage, which is a non-relational table storage that you can throw whatever you want to in. It has a REST API to interact with that. And then queue storage is for like if you had a service that maybe you need to push out messages or people consume those messages, you can use that queue storage to hold those and There's miles of documentation on all types of queues and messaging and TTLs and all kinds of stuff that I really have no idea about. This one's a cool feature that I demoed like a week ago. It has what's called Windows Azure Traffic Manager, and what that will do is you can set it up under 3 different ways. There's round robin, there is failover, and then there is performance. And what you can do is you can deploy an application to, say, Eastern US and maybe Eastern China, or East Asia, or North Asia, I think is what it is. North Asia. And if you have that set to performance, as people go to your application, it will figure out which one is a better route for them to go to, and it sends them directly to that data center instead of the other one. It's a problem if you have a database on the back end, because there can only be one database that those connect to. But if you didn't have a database-driven application, because it's 1999 or something, then you could easily do something like that. But more importantly, you could do like a failover. So if you were really worried that the Eastern United States data center was going to get hit by a meteor, you could have a failover for the Western U.S., although Microsoft's already doing that anyway. But maybe you wanted to be in Europe or something. So it does have a traffic manager built into it. It does have built-in identity stuff, so if you need to do authentication through live IDs or things like that. And the Windows Azure Mobile Services also has a large number of identity and authentication stuff built into it. Facebook, Live ID, Google, Yahoo. Philip's going to show you a little bit more about that. Messaging, this is how you can get your systems to talk to each other. Again, this is like a publish subscriber kind of thing. You can push out messages to everything using the messaging. I think it actually uses the service bus behind the scenes, or you could consume them, but it's the underlying thing on how all this stuff talks to each other anyway. It does have a cache that you can use. Typically, we use that for a session. If we deploy an application to multiple servers, you can't use your default in-proc session, so we use the AppFabric caching to save your session over to the central location. Networking, I kind of explained how, like Jeff has set up VPN access. You can set up your own VPNs, your own subnets, so that you can get maybe on-premise and cloud-based resources connected so that it can be authenticated with each other. CDN I talked about. And the media services is a fairly new one. I've used it a little bit, and you can basically, if you ever had to try to set up a streaming server, it's a real pain. It takes a lot of work and a lot of configuration. This basically, you upload your image, Microsoft will encode it, and then you can host it directly out of Windows Azure. They'll handle the streaming. You can either do it in a large number of formats. You can do DRM protected content. You can do live broadcast. We're not doing that right now. I guess I could. Maybe I could do that for another thing. There's a lot of different pieces of Azure. Now, the important thing to know is you don't have to use it all. You can use only pieces of it if you want to, which is what we tend to do with our new clients is we get them using this first because that's the easiest thing because everybody has a ton of information. And maybe they're not ready to move their applications to the Azure, but they all have maybe backups and stuff that they're doing. Storage is a great use of that. And with storage, you immediately get the CDN. So if you had an on-premise application and maybe it has a bunch of PDFs and these PDFs are stored in a database, and that database grows by 6 gig a day because these PDFs are so large, you could maybe use a pointer and save the image, save the PDFs into Windows Azure Storage and use a pointer to it in your database. And now you've reduced the size of that and you've offloaded it into Windows Azure Storage, which has 150 terabyte limit per account. So they do offer a development center in all these different languages: Node.js, Java, PHP, Python. People are always making new ones. I know a lot about the .NET one because that's the one over there. I know a little bit about the mobile one. I haven't done much with the other ones yet, but I've looked at the SDKs a little bit. But they do have a lot of open source things to integrate in with Azure because really behind the scenes, most of it is all REST-based web services that you're just interacting with. So, and there's a screenshot of something. Oh, a GitHub. So they have a bunch of GitHub information to pull down open source. I'm not going to talk about SQL database because I'm going to run out of time if I do. I'll tell you a little bit about the blob storage just so you can kind of see. Again, it's basically a highly redundant system that you can save your data to, and in that you can also get geo-replication to another data center, and then you can also enable CDN access so that you can pull these out of there. You can secure it. You can make it read, so if anyone knows the path to it, then they'll get whatever file's in there. You can make it so that only authenticated people can get to a particular file. And what's really interesting is I've only done this like in theory. I've done it like in testing once. Is you can use code to generate a URL that contains, for lack of a better term, like a passphrase that's good for like 5 minutes. So you could give that. So if you had an application to these secure PDFs, I'm pointing to Matt because I know he has an application like that. His PDFs are very specific, and he doesn't want everyone to be able to see them, only one particular thing. You could use your code to generate a dynamic URL for that PDF for someone to use at that particular point in time. If someone else took it, it would be expired in 2 minutes anyway, so it doesn't do any good. So you can, there's a lot of configuration you can do around that. You can look at a bunch of statistics on it as well as to how many reads and writes that you get. I'm not going to talk a lot about the identity. Just know that they have some stuff in there. It's all REST-based API stuff. You can do single sign-on for like live ID authentication across your apps and things like that.
I'll show that.
With Microsoft Vault.
What's that?
With Microsoft Vault.
Right.
The new tool.
That's
SSB marketing.
The service bus is really, this is interesting. This is really what's happening behind the scenes. This is how Microsoft Azure communicates with itself. But you can tap into that to do different things, like the service subscriber things I kind of talked about. And like if you needed your on-premise application to get information to a user, but you didn't necessarily want them to access your enterprise network, you can use a cloud application that then uses the service bus for that authentication and the communication behind the scenes. So now they can get to this app, but without ever having to get on your network, things like that. I'm not going to tell you anything about that because Phil's going to tell you all about it. I don't want to ruin the surprise. What? Don't look. No one look at this screen. So okay. Okay. So this is sales stuff. This is the pricing model for the VMs. Now, a thing to note, if you have a cloud service, it's the same price as an IaaS, same price as a virtual machine that you stand up, and it's all based on the size. And I don't even think this is right anymore. Maybe it is. I think it actually went down from here because I priced out two small servers, and it was $115 a month, whereas this used to be about $90 a month for one, and now two of them is $47.50. So I don't know what to, I have to like figure out the math on that. But I think they reduced prices. Now, one thing to note is, like I said, these are for VMs or cloud services. If you have a VM, you can have these pre-made packages. Again, like I said, of Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows Server 2008 R2 with SQL Server. All the prices include the OS license. If you stood up a VM and you wanted SQL Server to run, you could install your own version of SQL Server using your license. Or you can use an instance that Microsoft has, or an image that Microsoft has with SQL Server already on it, or SharePoint, BizTalk, and the price is like, I'm totally going to make this up, it's like $1.24 an hour or something like that. I don't know what it is. But they have like, it's a little bit more an hour. But you also get that SQL Server license inside of you. Does anyone know how much a SQL Server license is? Yeah. How much is it, Jeff?
Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong question.
Wrong question. It's like $40,000 per processor.
I thought you were asking about how much it is in the VM license together.
How much is it in VM license together?
It's $1.86 an hour.
There you go. $40,000 or whatever that is a month. So, James likes me to point that out. If you lived in all these countries, you could get an Azure account and make one, or if you want to journey there. Kazakhstan. So, I don't know why that slides in on there. We're all MSDM members. Are you an MSDM member, Jeremy?
I am.
You are, Jerry? Okay. Justin, are you? No? Okay. Well, if you were, you get a number of resources for free. But this is all wrong because they changed it. They used to like limit you as to like what you get, but now you get like $150, and it's however you spend it. If you want to have a server run, you can have a server run, but it's $150 credit every month. So this is all wrong. There's a nice slide. Now you're all installing it, and now that's it. Now we're eating lunch. So, is pizza here, Kyle?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'll show you. Let's see, what parts did I gloss over? Does anyone have any questions?
It's good overview.
It's a good overview. Like I said, most of the time the people in the room have never used Azure. Yes, Jeffrey.
I was just going to say, if you guys don't know, as an employee of BitWizards, you have a premium account, which is $700, that premium level that you had up there. So you do have resources to go in there and play around with if you haven't before. Jerry, the subscription.
Thank you.
Let me think of what else I wanted to show you about it. Yes, this is all this stuff. Let's go back over here. Let me show you. I can go back and show you the cloud server stuff now because now that is back up, certainly. All right. So this is what the accounts look like. And I'll show you a couple applications that we have that leverage a lot of aspects of it. But all these are cloud services running. So if I pick like Talking Parents, you'll see that that's running in 2 servers. This is a Kintico application, so it has a 3rd server that it uses for some back-end stuff, but the main side is actually running on 2 servers. But it's load balancing them out in front of that, all via this URL, so it's putting traffic on both of them. Another site that doesn't suck to look at, maybe for Jenny, sorry Jenny, be sexist and show you some women. This site is one that I made, and this is hosted in Windows Azure, but it's leveraging the CDN for all these images. If you notice, it loads very quickly, all these different images, and if you go into one, she might be naked, I don't know, sometimes they're naked. You see it loads them all very fast. Most of these images are anywhere between 3 and 5 megabytes each. Some of them are up to 20 megabytes each. But I'm actually loading them via the CDN, and I resize them when I copy them up there. And I'm in the wrong browser because I can't figure out how to do what I want to see. Let's try that again. So this is actually, why is that not using the CDN path? I should be using the CDN path. It's pulling it out of Windows Azure storage. Well, that's the point. It is storing all these images in Windows Azure storage, and I just have a pointer to the specific path that I build up dynamically behind the scenes. But most of these, I'm not using the CDN, which probably I should. But that's how it's so fast, is because I'm not loading them out of the database. They're loading directly from Windows Azure storage, and I've resized them all, so they're quite small. So, let's see, what other things do we have that I wanted to show you before we eat pizza? I know pizza get cold. How long did pizza get here? Somebody know? Just a few minutes?
Yeah, I saw him
Okay.
walking a few minutes ago.
I'll just give you a quick little overview in here then. This is the Windows Azure portal. The all items will show you everything in your account. This is our company account, so we have a lot of things associated with it. This is my account. I don't have quite so many things associated with it. I used to. I deleted them all. But these are your websites. These are the 3 websites we have running. Your virtual machines, if you have any there. I don't know if we have any virtual machines. We do. We have 14 of them. These are all the virtual machines, so we can connect to and RDP to those. This is just like if we had these running in a data center or in our local virtual host. It would be the same way. Mobile services, Philip will show you these, but these are where we kind of maintain all those. Cloud services, these are the platform as a service, the PaaS. SQL databases, these are all databases that we have deployed in SQL Azure, and you kind of you create a new server to connect to, and then that server can support multiple databases. As you see, this one server has lots of databases that we host inside of there. And it's really up to you if you want a new server. The server is in a data center, and therefore your database gets deployed into that server. It'll be deployed on whatever data center that is. So if you wanted to have a global thing, maybe you put servers in multiple data centers or something like that. The storage accounts are all the backend storage, the blob table, or the blob queue, and table. Which you get past each one of those. Everything in Azure has a unique URL. So whatever it is you create, it will always make a new URL just for you. If you create a cloud service, it'll be whatever you create .cloudapp.net. Make a website, it'll be whatever you say .azurewebsites.net. And I think the mobile services is Azure-mobile.net. Your storage will be whatever it is. It's if it's blob, it's your name .blob.core.windows.net, table.core.windows.net, which means if you were to give a group of people a lab, and in the lab it says create a My To-Do cloud service, more than half of them will probably try to make one that says My To-Do cloud service. and they will all fail because someone else on the planet has already made one, because everything is unique. So if I tried to make another one, if I were to come into here and make a new website, and I named it SOLTIS demo, let's just double check to make sure that's what I named. SOLTIS demo 1. If I try to do SOLTIS demo 1, it's going to yell at me and tell me that name is already taken. So you can't duplicate that. So, all right. There's a bunch of other stuff in here. Some of these are preview services that you have to sign up for, but some of them are just available. But there's things like Insight, which is a new big cluster of things or something. I don't know what that is. I haven't messed with that one. Does support SQL reporting. I've never been able to create a SQL report to upload, but as I understand it, if you can make a SQL report against the Windows Azure database and upload that report, then it'll give you a URL, and you can give that URL to people to then hit your SQL Azure data and get a SQL report based off what you have and control access to how many times people can do and stuff like that. The media services, I think I do have something under media services. Oh, it's disconnected. Awesome. This is where you can upload your videos and host them. The service bus, if you want to do your underlying communication behind the scenes. I have no idea what BizTalk Services is. I've never used it in my life. I signed up for it just so I can see it. Recovery services is another thing where I think you can make these data vaults. Jeff, do you know much about the recovery services?
No.
No? Okay. I think you can like put data or disks in there, and then, I don't know. I have to look at that one still. I haven't done that one. You can create your own Active Directory, so you can actually have your own servers up there for authentication and stuff, and then add things to them so that you get Active Directory throughout that. You can create your own networks, your own DNS servers and stuff like that, so you can kind of get interconnectivity between your on-premise and off-premise machines. And what's really interesting is you can do these things called add-ons, and this is kind of what you're talking about, Mark, with software as a service. Other people have already done this, either with data or with services, and they're hosting them as software as a service so you can consume them within your apps. These are hosted through Windows Azure, so if you had a bunch of data that you wanted to sell to people, you could actually list it in here and people could consume it. Things like IP checks and stuff like that.
I think SendGrid's in there too.
What's that?
SendGrid?
Is it?
I think so.
I don't know. It's probably under services. It might be. They're always adding more. Yep, there's something with SendGrid. Yep. So that you can consume that, so you have SMTP within your apps and stuff. And then there's this oddball place where it's called settings. And the thing I wanted to tell you there is when you create a Windows Azure account, a subscription, you can actually designate any number of live IDs to be co-administrators of it. So you can give someone else access. So what we do is we get our clients to create a Windows Azure account, and then we give them a specific live ID to make as a co-administrator so that we can get in there and do that. That's why our billing account has so many things, because this one account is associated with all these different companies. Some of them are BillWizard and some of them are not, but we have this ID as a co-administrator of it. But what we're quickly finding is there are 6 pages of stuff in here, which makes it a little difficult. So we're actually going to make it individual to each customer is going to have a specific BillWizard live ID that we'll give them. They'll be a co-administrator. You can also do what's called an affinity group. And what that is you kind of define a group and a data center that it's in, and then anything you assign to that, Microsoft will keep them all in that data center together, and if it needs to cycle them, it will cycle them all together so you get faster connectivity and it's easier to manage stuff. So you can, instead of always choosing the East US data center, for everything, we could just say BillWizard's East, and then make an affinity group, and everything we make, we don't choose the data center, we choose the affinity group, and Microsoft keeps everything deployed together behind the scenes and clustered together so we get faster interconnectivity and performance out of everything that we have. So,
I got a question.
yo man,
When are they going to add the CDN stuff into the new portal?
It's coming.
it's a good question, man. I don't know. They're constantly bringing it.
Go to the previous portal, it tells you.
Yeah, JJ
It's
is
the last
referring
thing we
to
moved.
the previous portal was a Silverlight-based portal. The other one was HTML5, and it's being deprecated, but there's still a couple things that are left. Meaning the CDN. Yeah, they're working on it right here. That's what they're saying. They're available now on the new Windows Azure portal. They're saying the traffic manager, the cache, and CDN will be available in the next one in the next couple months. So they haven't quite moved everything out of this portal to the HTML5 one. Mainly the caching and the traffic manager, which I don't know if I have anything set up or not. I may or may not. I did. I may have deleted it though. But this is where you have to go to manage that. You have to go to the previous portal until they build it out. And that's about it. How my throat really hurt. Any other questions? That's kind of an overview of Windows Azure. And the big thing is there's a lot of pieces of it. And you don't have to use all of it. You can pick and choose out of it what makes the most sense for your applications or your particular project. And to give you a good example, we have this hosting server. We have this traditional hosting server, and on there we have a database server, a web server and database server. And we wanted to move these websites over to Windows Azure, but the application itself wasn't quite ready to move to Windows Azure. So what I did was I took the databases and I migrated them to SQL Azure, and I connected our hosting center web server to hit SQL Azure directly for the data. Meanwhile, I took the application, I converted it to make it ready for Windows Azure, which took a couple weeks, and then I deployed it into Windows Azure. When it was ready, I changed the URL to point from my hosting server to now the Windows Azure-based one, but the whole time the server was hitting the database, so all the data was still intact, and there was never any downtime or any data loss from migration. That's kind of using pieces of it throughout the migration process, but just to kind of give you an example, you can kind of choose it and sculpt it however you want. But I will say that storage is probably the easiest thing to integrate into any project because everyone needs it and it's really easy to do. So now it's time to eat pizza, and then Phil's going to tell you all about Windows Azure Mobile Services.